Hell in Osipovichi. The untold story of a World War II hero. Picture this. It's the dead of night, and the sky is lit up like a 4th of July fireworks show gone wild. Flames shoot into the air, explosions rock the ground, and the sound of chaos fills the night. Train wheels fly through the sky like frisbees, steel rails twist into knots, and thick black smoke chokes the air. This isn't a Hollywood blockbuster. It's the real-life story of Osipovichi, a small railway station in Belarus that became the stage for the biggest transportation sabotage of World War II. At the center of this fiery apocalypse was one man, Fyodor Krylovich, a 26-year-old electrician who, with nothing but grit, cunning, and a couple of homemade bombs, brought the Nazi war machine to its knees. This is a story of bravery, ingenuity, and the kind of determination that Americans admire. Think Captain America meets MacGyver, but in the heart of occupied Europe. In this massive tale, we'll unpack the daring mission, explore its impact on the Nazi war effort, and reflect on what it means to stand up against tyranny. Plus, I'll throw in some economic analysis and historical context to show just how big this moment was. So, grab a coffee, get comfy, and let's jump into the action. The heart of Nazi logistics. In 1943, Osipovichi wasn't just some sleepy train stop in the middle of nowhere. It was a critical hub in the Nazi supply chain, a crossroads for trains carrying fuel, ammo, tanks, and food to the Eastern Front. Think of it as the grand central station of Hitler's war effort in the Soviet Union. Trains from Mogilev to Slutsk and Gomel to Minsk passed through here, feeding the German armies fighting in massive battles like Kursk, the biggest tank battle in history. The Nazis knew how vital Osipovichi was. They guarded it like Fort Knox. Barbed wire surrounded the station, guard dogs patrolled the tracks, and armed soldiers watched every move. They didn't trust the local workers, so they brought in German railway crews from the fatherland to keep things running smoothly. Nearby, a Nazi-run prison camp held Soviet POWs, adding to the atmosphere of fear and control. Pulling off any kind of sabotage here was like trying to sneak into Area 51 with a sparkler. But even under this iron grip, one man refused to back down. His name was Fyodor Krylovich, and he was about to light a match under the Nazi war machine. Meet Fyodor Krylovich, the reluctant hero. Fyodor wasn't your typical war hero. He wasn't a grizzled commando or a secret agent with a license to kill. He was a regular guy, an electrician working at the Osipovichi train station. But this 26-year-old had a fire in his belly. He'd already seen action before the war, fighting against the Japanese at Kokon Gol in 1939 and in the Soviet-Finnish War of 1940. When Hitler invaded the Soviet Union on June 22, 1941, Fyodor marched straight to the local draft office, ready to fight. But the government had other plans. As a skilled railway worker, he was deemed too valuable to send to the front. His job was to keep the trains running, a job that soon put him right under the Nazis' noses. When German troops rolled into Osipovichi on June 30, 1941, Fyodor could have fled. But that wasn't his style. He stayed put, working at the station and quietly finding ways to mess with the enemy. He'd tamper with electrical wiring, break signal lights, and slow down operations whenever he could. It was small stuff, but it was his way of fighting back. Think of it like a mechanic secretly loosening bolts on a race car. Nothing flashy, but enough to cause trouble. By late 1941, Fyodor wasn't alone. A secret resistance cell formed among the station's workers, and soon they connected with an underground group from Minsk called the Braves, led by a guy named Alexander Rabsevich. This group started feeding intelligence to the Soviet partisans, train schedules, cargo details, troop movements. It was critical work, but for Fyodor it wasn't enough. He wanted to hit the Nazis where it hurt, hard. He begged for explosives, for a chance to join the partisans in the forests and take the fight to the enemy. And in 1942, his chance finally came. The power of a single bomb. In 1942, the Minsk resistance managed to smuggle a special kind of explosive to Osipovichi, an SPM, or medium stick-on mine. This was a small, magnetic bomb that could be attached to a train car and set to detonate hours later. For Fyodor, it was like getting a Christmas present wrapped in dynamite. Finally, he had the tools to do some real damage. His first mission was a success. Fyodor slipped the mine onto a train car loaded with ammo, attaching it to the undercarriage while pretending to check the wiring. A few hours later, on the stretch between Osipovichi and Bobruisk, the train went up in a massive fireball. The Nazis didn't suspect sabotage at first. After all, the explosion happened far from the station. Fyodor and his crew were in the clear. Over the next year, more mines trickled in. Fyodor used them to blow up trains carrying tanks, fuel, and supplies. Each operation was riskier than the last. The Nazis tightened security, checking every worker and inspecting every train. The resistance had to get creative, staging distractions like fake arguments or drop tools to give Fyodor a few precious seconds to plant the bombs. It was like a high-stakes heist movie, except the prize was freedom, and the cost of failure was death. But Fyodor wasn't satisfied with small hits. He dreamed of something bigger, a sabotage so massive it would shake the Nazis to their core. In July 1943, he got his shot. By mid-1943, the war was at a turning point. The Battle of Kursk was raging, and the Nazis were throwing everything they had into it, including their fearsome Tiger tanks, 70-ton beasts that could shred anything in their path. The resistance got word that a train loaded with Tigers was passing through Osipovichi, headed for the front. Blowing it up could cripple the German offensive. The plan was straight out of a spy thriller. One of Fyodor's buddies, Sergei Mogilny, would sabotage the signal light at the station, forcing the train to stop. Fyodor, as the on-duty electrician, would be sent to fix it, carrying 2 mines hidden in his toolbox. He'd walk along the train with a German guard trailing him, but at key moments, other resistance members would distract the guard, giving Fyodor a chance to slap the magnetic mines onto the lead and rear cars. The bombs would go off hours later, derailing the train far from Osipovichi. It was a solid plan until it wasn't. The train with the Tigers arrived, but instead of staying on the main tracks, the Nazis moved it to the North Yard, a high-security area where only German workers were allowed. To make matters worse, a new train rolled onto the tracks where the Tigers had been. A train loaded with fuel tankers. Fyodor was stuck. The signal was already sabotaged, the mines were ready, and the guard was waiting. He had to act fast. In a split-second decision, Fyodor pivoted. If he couldn't hit the Tigers, he'd take out the fuel train. As he walked along the tracks, he planted 1 mine under the rear tanker and another under the lead tanker, pulling the pins to arm them. The bombs were set to blow in 3 hours. But then, the Nazis threw another curveball. Instead of sending the train on its way, they hooked it up to a shunting locomotive and moved it to the North Yard, right next to the Tigers and a train full of ammo. Fyodor watched, stunned, as his bombs rolled into the heart of the Nazi stronghold. Little did he know, he'd just set the stage for the biggest bang of the war. The night the sky burned. At around 3 a.m. on July 30th, 1943, Osipovichi turned into a war zone. The first mine detonated under a fuel tanker, igniting a massive explosion. Flames spread like wildfire, licking at the nearby ammo train. When the fire hit the ammunition, all hell broke loose. The blasts were so powerful they were heard in Minsk, 60 miles away. The sky glowed red, as if the sun had risen early. Train wheels soared through the air, rails twisted into pretzels, and the North Yard became a smoldering wasteland. The Nazis were caught off guard. Guards fired wildly into the sky, thinking it was a Soviet air raid. Surviving soldiers fled in panic, abandoning their posts. Pieces of Tiger tanks, tracks, turrets, gun barrels were scattered for miles. One chunk of metal crashed through the roof of the local Nazi headquarters, taking out a couple of officers. The station's buildings were wiped out, and the nearby prison camp's guards ran for their lives, allowing dozens of Soviet POWs to escape and join the partisans. The fire raged for a full day. The Nazis didn't even try to put it out, they just waited for it to burn itself out. When the smoke cleared, sappers from Minsk and Mogilev were called in to clear unexploded ordnance. The damage was staggering. The toll on the Nazis. The sabotage in Osipovichi obliterated. 5 locomotives, 25 fuel tankers, 8 tankers of aviation oil, 60 cars of ammunition, 20 pieces of military equipment including Tiger tanks, 12 cars of food supplies, a coal depot, a massive crane, 6 rail lines and all their infrastructure. This wasn't just a blow to a single train, it was a body blow to the Nazi war machine. The loss of fuel and ammo crippled German operations at Kursk, forcing them to reroute supplies through already overloaded stations. This delayed their offensive and gave the Soviets a critical edge. Some sources even claim that heads rolled in Berlin, with high-ranking officers sacked for the disaster. The sabotage in Osipovichi wasn't just a local victory, it was a turning point in the war. To understand why Osipovichi mattered so much, let's talk about logistics. World War II wasn't just about tanks and planes, it was about keeping them fueled, armed, and fed. The Nazis relied on railroads to move 80% of their supplies on the Eastern Front. Osipovichi was a linchpin, handling up to 20% of the cargo headed to the front in 1943. Knocking it out was like cutting an artery. The sabotage disrupted the flow of supplies at a critical moment. The Battle of Kursk, fought in July and August 1943, was the largest tank battle in history and a make-or-break moment for the Nazis. Losing fuel, ammo, and tanks at Osipovichi meant German divisions were under-equipped, giving the Red Army a chance to counterattack. The Soviet victory at Kursk marked the beginning of the end for Hitler's dreams of conquering the East. Calculating the exact cost of the sabotage is tricky, but let's break it down. A single Tiger tank cost about 250,000 Reichsmarks, roughly $1 million in today's dollars. Destroying 20 tanks alone cost the Nazis $20 million. Add in 25 tankers of fuel, about 500,000 gallons, 60 cars of ammo, locomotives, and infrastructure, and you're looking at a direct loss of $50 to $100 million in modern terms. That's not pocket change, even for a war machine like Germany's. The indirect costs were even higher. Rerouting supplies burned extra fuel and wore out equipment. Delays meant troops went without food and tanks sat idle. The Kursk offensive faltered, and the Nazis never fully recovered. Some historians argue that Osipovichi was a key factor in the Soviet victory, which shifted the momentum of the war. Lessons for today. Fyodor's story resonates even now. In a world of drones, cyber attacks, and supply chain wars, one person can still make a difference. Whether it's a coder disrupting a network or a whistleblower exposing corruption, small actions can have massive impacts. Fyodor's courage reminds us that standing up to oppression, whether it's a fascist regime or a modern-day tyrant, starts with one person saying, "Enough." From saboteur to partisan. After the sabotage, Fyodor didn't stick around. That same night, he and his resistance crew slipped out of Osipovichi and joined the 1st Bobruisk Partisan Brigade. Fyodor took charge of a sabotage unit, blowing up bridges, derailing trains, and ambushing Nazi convoys. He was wounded twice and suffered multiple concussions, but he kept fighting until the war's end. After the war, Fyodor returned to Osipovichi and went back to his old job as an electrician. But the injuries took their toll. In 1959, at just 43, he passed away. His sacrifice wasn't fully recognized until 1948, when he was awarded the Order of Lenin for his role in the sabotage. The Gold Star of the Hero of the Soviet Union went to Alexander Rapsevich, the leader of the Braves, who was credited with planning the operation. A hero remembered. It wasn't until 2009 that Osipovichi honored Fyodor with a monument. For decades, his name was known only to locals and historians. But his legacy lives on. It's a testament to the unsung heroes who risk everything for freedom, often without fame or reward. Fyodor Krylovich wasn't a superhero. He was a regular guy with a job, a family, and a hometown. But when the Nazis came, he didn't bow down. He fought back with whatever he had: wires, tools, and eventually bombs. His story is a reminder that ordinary people can do extraordinary things. It's the kind of tale that inspires us to stand up, whether it's against bullies in our community or bigger injustices in the world. For Americans, this story hits home. It's about standing up to tyranny just like the Founding Fathers did in 1776. It's about ingenuity like the soldiers who built makeshift defenses at Bastogne. And it's about sacrifice like the countless heroes who fought for freedom. Fyodor's story belongs to all of us who value liberty. Guys, if this story fired you up, don't keep it to yourself. Hit that subscribe button to catch more epic tales of courage and history. Drop a comment below. What did you think of Fyodor's guts? Do you know any stories of hometown heroes who stood up to the odds? Share them. Let's keep these stories alive and inspire each other to be the change we want to see. One person, one action, one moment. That's all it takes to make history.